Hi, this is Pat Johnson, your sociology instructor. In this mini lecture, we're going to talk about the educational practice of tracking. When I was in first grade, 6 years old, I was put into the Redbirds group. I didn't know what that meant, but I figured it out pretty quickly. The Redbirds were the dumb birds. I couldn't read at the beginning of first grade. I don't think it was because I was stupid. It was just that I hadn't been taught how to read yet. I was the youngest of four pretty closely spaced kids. My parents were very busy, and at that time in the 1960s, it was thought that reading was something that was taught in first grade. So although I knew some of my letters, I didn't have any clue on how to read anything other than my name when I entered first grade. Other kids were ahead of me and were placed in other groups, like the Bluebird group. And so I was a slower reader, and my group had lower expectations placed on them, and we were thought to be not quite as bright as the Bluebirds. I quickly realized that I didn't like being a redbird. I didn't like being thought of as dumb, although nobody called it that. And I got out of the redbird group within a week and was up to speed on my reading fairly quickly and became a bluebird. Why am I saying all of this? What was going on was I was experiencing tracking. Tracking is dividing students into groups that receive different instruction on the basis of assumed similarities in ability or attainment. So what we see in schools is students being tracked in the classes that they are put into different classes that are different tracks based on their abilities, or sometimes more insidious, based on assumed abilities because of their demographic characteristics. If you remember in the Harry Potter movies, there was a sorting hat, and the children were sorted into different houses. Tracking is basically sorting students into below average, average, and above average groups. Often those groups are college preparatory, technical, and vocational, with the students with the highest test scores put into college preparatory classes where they might be in honors or AP and taking harder math and harder English classes and so on. Now, I don't see a problem with sorting students so that students are learning at the ability that they find most beneficial. But I do think tracking is horrible to students when it's based not on ability, but on assumed abilities. My father remembers when he was a child, a very, very poor child in the worst section of Detroit, that somebody looked at him as a poor immigrant child and assumed that he didn't have a brain and put him in lower level classes and said he wouldn't amount to anything. That's a form of tracking. So when you think back on your own education, you may not realize you were being tracked and put into different types of classes, but you probably were. And this is a system used in education to put children of similar abilities or perceived abilities on a track to group them so that students who perform the same can have that speed of education.